3 days before the annual corporate gala, my wife, Olivia Carter, stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her gold necklace. Her reflection stared back at me as I entered the room, a faint but unmistakable smile playing on her lips. She was 45, still radiant, with her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders and her green eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and something I couldn't quite place. "You don't have to come this time," she said lightly, her voice tinged with a casualness that felt almost too deliberate. At first, I brushed it off. Olivia often said things like this, not wanting me to feel obligated to attend her work events. But this time, something about the way she said it stuck in my mind. There was a flicker in her eyes, a flash of something I couldn't quite identify. "Why not?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed and watching her closely. I was 48, a senior account executive at a major manufacturing firm, and by all accounts, I'd lived a charmed life. But lately, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "It's just one of those boring work things," she replied, her tone airy. A bunch of advertising executives patting themselves on the back. "I'll be home before you know it." It wasn't the words that lingered, it was the delivery. Olivia had always been a social butterfly, thriving in the spotlight and charming everyone in the room. In our 25 years of marriage, I'd attended countless galas, fundraisers, and networking events by her side. She never hesitated to show me off, introducing me as Daniel, my better half. But this time, she seemed different. I shrugged off the unease, telling myself I was imagining things. But as the days passed, that odd smile of hers replayed in my mind like a broken record. It was the kind of smile that hinted at secrets, and secrets had no place in the life we had built together. Olivia and I met in 5th grade in our quiet hometown of Springfield, Illinois. She was the new girl with golden hair and a confidence that made her stand out among the other kids. I was smitten from the start, though it took years for me to work up the courage to talk to her. By high school, we were inseparable. I asked her to prom with a handwritten note slipped into her locker, and she said yes with a smile that could have stopped traffic. Our small-town romance blossomed into something real, something lasting. When we both got into the University of Illinois, it felt like fate. We shared a tiny apartment off campus, scraping by on part-time jobs and student loans. Those were some of the best years of my life, nights spent dreaming about our future, mornings filled with the smell of cheap coffee and the sound of her humming in the kitchen. We got married a week after graduation. Our wedding was modest, held in the backyard of her parents' house, but it was perfect. Olivia walked down the aisle in a borrowed dress, her smile brighter than any diamond. Our lives evolved quickly after our wedding. Olivia and I moved into a small rental in downtown Chicago, where opportunities seemed endless. I had just landed an entry-level job at a manufacturing firm, a position that barely paid enough to cover our rent. Olivia, always ambitious, found a position as a junior designer at a local advertising agency. Those early years were challenging but exciting. We spent countless late nights brainstorming ideas for our future, sharing dreams of one day owning a home near the water. Every penny was carefully budgeted. Olivia handled the groceries while I managed the bills, often leaving just enough for a Friday night treat, usually takeout pizza and a rented movie. Despite the financial strain, we were happy. Olivia's creativity blossomed at work, and she quickly earned a reputation for her innovative ideas. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my job, determined to climb the corporate ladder. 3 years into our marriage, our daughter Sophia was born. I remember the moment Olivia placed her in my arms for the first time, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Sophia became the center of our world, and every decision we made revolved around giving her the best life possible. When Sophia was 5, we achieved our dream of buying a home. It wasn't the lakeside mansion we'd eventually own, but it was ours, a modest 3-bedroom house with a yard big enough for a swing set. Olivia painted the nursery herself, choosing soft yellow walls that seemed to glow in the sunlight. As the years passed, our careers flourished. Olivia's knack for visual storytelling earned her a promotion to creative director, and her salary doubled practically overnight. I, too, climbed the corporate ranks, becoming the youngest regional account manager in my firm's history. With our combined incomes, we decided it was time to upgrade. That's when we found the property on Lake Michigan, a foreclosure with potential. The house was in shambles when we first saw it, but Olivia could already picture what it could become. "This is it," she said, her green eyes sparkling. "This is where we'll grow old together." The renovations were grueling. Every spare moment was spent tearing down old wallpaper, sanding floors, and painting walls. Olivia designed every detail, from the kitchen backsplash to the custom bookshelves in the living room. By the time we finished, the house was unrecognizable, a stunning lakeside retreat that felt like an extension of Olivia's creative vision. Sophia grew up in that house. She learned to swim in the lake, hosted sleepovers in the finished basement, and spent countless summer evenings roasting marshmallows by the fire pit. It was a house full of laughter and love, or so I believed. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment I began to sense that something wasn't right. It was subtle at first, a missed goodnight kiss, a distracted look during dinner, an unexplained late meeting. Olivia's job had always been demanding, but in the last few years, it seemed to consume her. She started spending more nights away from home, attending networking events and client dinners. When I asked about them, she'd wave me off with a smile and a quick reassurance. "It's just work, Daniel," she'd say. "You know how it is." I wanted to believe her. After all, Olivia had always been honest with me, or so I thought. I told myself that her job was simply stressful, that her late nights were a sign of her dedication, not a symptom of something darker. But then there were the phone calls. I'd walk into the room, and Olivia would quickly end a conversation, slipping her phone into her pocket with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd shrug and say, "Just a client." I brushed it off, convincing myself that I was overthinking things. Olivia was my wife, my partner, the woman I had loved since childhood. Why would she lie to me? The night of the gala arrived, and despite Olivia's insistence that I stay home, I decided to attend. Something about her demeanor had been bothering me all week, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to see for myself. When Olivia walked down the stairs in a shimmering black dress that hugged her figure perfectly, my breath caught. She was stunning, more radiant than I had seen her in years. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her green eyes sparkled with excitement. "You look incredible," I said, meaning every word. She smiled but didn't respond, her eyes darting toward the clock. "We should go," she said, grabbing her clutch. The gala was held at an upscale downtown venue, a grand ballroom filled with glittering chandeliers and elegantly dressed attendees. As we entered, it became clear that Olivia was the star of the evening. Colleagues greeted her with warmth, their smiles lingering a little too long. Then I saw him, Nathan Bennett. He was tall, silver-haired, and exuded the kind of confidence that comes from years of success. As soon as he spotted Olivia, his face lit up with a smile that felt too intimate. "Daniel, this is Nathan," Olivia said, placing her hand lightly on his arm. I extended my hand, forcing a polite smile. "Nice to meet you." Nathan's handshake was firm, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me uneasy. "I've heard a lot about you," he said, his tone friendly but laced with something I couldn't quite identify. As the evening progressed, I couldn't help but notice the way Olivia interacted with Nathan. Their conversations were easy, their laughter genuine. And then there were the glances, subtle but telling. I tried to enjoy the evening, but my focus kept drifting back to Olivia and Nathan. She was animated in her conversations with him, her laugh a little louder than usual, her hand brushing his arm in a way that felt too familiar. From across the room, I watched as Nathan leaned in to whisper something in her ear. Olivia smiled, smirked, and nodded, her eyes sparkling with a kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years. It was a smile I thought she had reserved for me. The breaking point came on the dance floor. Olivia and I had always enjoyed dancing together, it was one of the few traditions we had kept alive over the years. But that night, something was different. She seemed distracted, her movements stiff and uncoordinated. Her eyes kept darting across the room, searching for someone. I didn't have to guess who. When I spun her, I caught a glimpse of Nathan standing near the bar, watching us with a smug grin. It was as if he knew something I didn't, as if he was daring me to confront him. I pulled Olivia closer, lowering my voice. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Of course," she said, her smile faltering for a brief moment. But her eyes betrayed her. By the time we got home, the tension was unbearable. Olivia kicked off her heels and started up the stairs, but I stopped her. "Wait," I said, my voice firm. "We need to talk." She turned, her expression wary. "About what?" "About Nathan," I said, crossing my arms. Her face darkened for a split second before she forced a laugh. "Daniel, you're being ridiculous. Nathan is just a colleague. Then why does he act like he's more than that?" I shot back. Olivia sighed, shaking her head. "You're imagining things." But I wasn't. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as Olivia slept soundly beside me. Her even breathing only heightened my unease. Every interaction with Nathan replayed in my mind like a haunting reel, the glances, the laughter, the whispered words. It all felt wrong. I turned to Olivia, studying her face in the dim light. She looked peaceful, almost serene, as if she had nothing to hide. But I knew better. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to find out what it was. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't rely on Olivia to tell me the truth, and I couldn't confront her without evidence. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I reached out to a private investigator named Marcus Hayes, a no-nonsense professional who came highly recommended. "I want to know everything," I told him during our first meeting. "Who she's with, where she goes, what she does. I need the truth." Marcus nodded, jotting down notes. "I'll get started right away." It didn't take long for Marcus to uncover the first pieces of evidence. A few days later, he sent me a series of photos. There was Olivia, stepping out of her car in front of the Azure Hotel, a boutique hotel known for its exclusivity. Nathan was waiting for her, his posture casual but his smile smug. The photos hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at them for hours, unable to look away. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore, it was real. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus sent me more updates, photos of Olivia and Nathan walking into restaurants, sharing intimate conversations over drinks, and, worst of all, entering the Azure Hotel together. He even managed to capture audio recordings of their conversations. Hearing Olivia's voice, soft, flirtatious, was like a dagger to my chest. "I can't believe how easy this is," she said in one clip, laughing. "Daniel doesn't suspect a thing." By the time Marcus handed me his final report, I felt like a shell of the man I once was. The evidence was overwhelming: photos, videos, receipts. There was no denying what was happening. But confronting Olivia wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about reclaiming my dignity. Armed with Marcus's final report, I felt both empowered and hollow. Every fiber of my being wanted to confront Olivia immediately, to throw the evidence on the table and demand answers. But I knew better than to act on impulse. Instead, I spent the next few days observing her. She continued her routine as if nothing had changed, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. She kissed me goodbye in the mornings, texted me updates about her day, and laughed at my jokes during dinner. But now, I saw her actions for what they were, a carefully curated performance meant to maintain the illusion of our perfect life. And every smile, every laugh, every touch felt like a betrayal. I spent nights going over Marcus's report, analyzing every detail. I organized the photos, transcripts, and videos into a neat file, ready to present to Olivia when the time came. But I wasn't just preparing for a confrontation, I was preparing for the fallout. I began making quiet moves to protect myself. Our joint accounts were divided, my name quietly removed from certain liabilities. I even met with a lawyer to discuss my options. I need to know where I stand, I told her, sliding the evidence across her desk. She reviewed it with a professional detachment that both reassured and unsettled me. You have a strong case, she said finally. But you need to tread carefully. The tipping point came during a dinner party Olivia had planned weeks ago. It was a small gathering of her colleagues, including Nathan. I watched from across the room as she laughed at his jokes, her hand resting lightly on his arm. It was as if they had forgotten I was there, or maybe they didn't care. When Nathan approached me, drink in hand, I forced a polite smile. "Daniel, it's great to see you," he said, his tone smooth. "You too," I replied, though every word felt like poison on my tongue. The evening passed in a haze of forced smiles and empty conversations. By the time the last guest left, I was seething. That night, as Olivia was clearing the dishes, I placed the file on the kitchen counter. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. She looked up, her brow furrowing. "What's this?" "Open it," I said. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the photos and transcripts. Her face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock. "Daniel, I can explain," she began, her voice shaking. "Explain?" I asked, my voice rising. "Explain what, Olivia? That you've been lying to me for over a year? That you've been sneaking around with Nathan?" Olivia's excuses poured out in a desperate rush. "It wasn't serious," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It didn't mean anything." "It didn't mean anything?" I repeated incredulously. "You risked our marriage, our family, for something that didn't mean anything?" She sobbed, begging me to forgive her. But her words felt hollow, her tears insincere. The damage was done, and there was no going back. The tipping point came during a dinner party Olivia had planned weeks ago. It was a small gathering of her colleagues, including Nathan. I watched from across the room as she laughed at his jokes, her hand resting lightly on his arm. It was as if they had forgotten I was there, or maybe they didn't care. When Nathan approached me, drink in hand, I forced a polite smile. "Daniel, it's great to see you," he said, his tone smooth. "You too," I replied, though every word felt like poison on my tongue. The evening passed in a haze of forced smiles and empty conversations. By the time the last guest left, I was seething. That night, as Olivia was clearing the dishes, I placed the file on the kitchen counter. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. She looked up, her brow furrowing. "What's this?" "Open it," I said. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the photos and transcripts. Her face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock. "Daniel, I can explain," she began, her voice shaking. "Explain?" I asked, my voice rising. "Explain what, Olivia? That you've been lying to me for over a year? That you've been sneaking around with Nathan?" Olivia's excuses poured out in a desperate rush. "It wasn't serious," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It didn't mean anything." "It didn't mean anything?" I repeated incredulously. "You risked our marriage, our family, for something that didn't mean anything?" She sobbed, begging me to forgive her. But her words felt hollow, her tears insincere. The damage was done, and there was no going back. The next day, Sophia called. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "Ask your mother," I said, unable to hide the bitterness in my tone. She hesitated, then said, "She told me you're overreacting, that it was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" The words ignited a fresh wave of anger. "It's not a misunderstanding, Sophia. Your mother betrayed me." To my dismay, Sophia sided with Olivia. "Dad, it's not that big of a deal," she said dismissively. "People make mistakes." "Mistakes?" I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "This wasn't a mistake, Sophia. This was a calculated choice." But Sophia refused to see it. "You're being dramatic," she said. "Mom still loves you." Her words felt like a slap in the face. My own daughter, the one person I thought would understand, had turned against me. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings, financial maneuvers, and tense interactions with Olivia. I filed for divorce, determined to sever every tie to the woman who had betrayed me. I also made the painful decision to withdraw from Sophia's wedding. If she wanted to invite Nathan and continue supporting her mother's actions, I couldn't be part of it. Without my financial support, Olivia's life began to unravel. The house, the car, the lifestyle she had built on my trust, all of it crumbled. Nathan's wife, armed with the evidence I provided, filed for divorce and had him removed from their company. With his career in ruins, Nathan could no longer support Olivia. Life after the confrontation was eerily quiet. Olivia and I had agreed to live under the same roof temporarily as the divorce proceedings were underway, but the air in the house was thick with tension. We passed each other like strangers, speaking only when absolutely necessary. Olivia, once full of confidence, now seemed like a shadow of her former self. She tried to make amends, cooking my favorite meals, leaving notes on the counter, even attempting small talk at breakfast. But every gesture felt forced, her guilt seeping through her every action. I spent most of my time at work or out of the house, avoiding her as much as possible. When I wasn't working, I was meticulously organizing my finances, ensuring that every penny was accounted for. Olivia had no idea how much I had already moved into separate accounts, or that the house she loved so much was now a liability she would soon have to bear alone. The day Olivia received the foreclosure notice was the day I knew I was finally free. She had ignored the mounting bills for months, convinced that I would swoop in to save her. But I had no intention of rescuing her from the mess she had created. When she confronted me, her voice was a mixture of anger and desperation. "Daniel, you can't just let the house go. This is our home." "No, Olivia," I replied, my tone cold and unwavering. "This was your home. And you made it clear you didn't value it, or me." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. I had spent too long trying to fix a marriage that she had already destroyed. With the divorce finalized, I packed my belongings and left the house for good. I bought a small property in Sarasota, Florida, a modest beachside cottage that felt like a sanctuary. My days were simple but fulfilling. I took long walks along the shore, spent afternoons reading on the porch, and rediscovered hobbies I had long forgotten. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I occasionally heard updates about Olivia and Sophia. They had moved into a cramped apartment in a less-than-ideal neighborhood, struggling to make ends meet. Nathan had disappeared from their lives entirely, leaving Olivia to face the consequences of her actions alone. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of Olivia's betrayal had been overwhelming, but it had also forced me to confront truths I had long ignored. I had spent so much of my life building a future for my family, sacrificing my own happiness for theirs. But in the end, it was those sacrifices that had given me the strength to rebuild. Freedom wasn't just about leaving behind a toxic relationship, it was about reclaiming my sense of self, my dignity, and my happiness. As the waves crashed against the shore, I smiled to myself. My life was far from perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Sophia and I continued to rebuild our relationship, one conversation at a time. She visited me often in Sarasota, and we would spend hours talking about her life, her dreams, and even her struggles. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when the weight of the past threatened to pull us apart, but we worked through it together. I was determined to be the father she needed, even if it meant confronting my own shortcomings. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sophia turned to me and said, "Dad, I'm really glad we have this. I don't know what I would have done without you." I smiled, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Me too, Sophia," I said. "Me too." Olivia, on the other hand, remained a distant figure in my life. I heard snippets of her life through Sophia, how she had moved to a smaller town, how she was trying to start over. But I didn't reach out, and she didn't either. It was as if we had silently agreed to let the past stay in the past. I had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for my own. Holding on to anger and resentment would only have weighed me down, and I had worked too hard to rebuild my life to let that happen. One day, Sophia called with news that caught me off guard. "Dad, Mom's getting married again," she said, her voice tinged with a mix of surprise and uncertainty. I paused, the brush hovering over the canvas, and took a moment to process what she had said. "Oh," I replied, unsure of how to respond. "Do you know who it is?" "Some guy she met at work," Sophia said. "I don't know much about him, but she seems happy." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Well, I hope it works out for her," I said, and I meant it. Olivia and I had shared a lifetime of memories, both good and bad, but our story was over. If she had found happiness with someone else, I wasn't going to stand in her way. The news of Olivia's remarriage didn't affect me as much as I thought it would. If anything, it served as a reminder of how far I had come. I had built a life that was no longer defined by my relationship with her, and that was something to be proud of. I continued to focus on my own journey, finding joy in the small, everyday moments that made life worth living. Sophia's visits became more frequent, and I cherished every moment we spent together. She had grown into a remarkable woman, strong and resilient, and I couldn't have been prouder of her. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "Dad, I'm really glad we have this. I don't know what I would have done without you." I smiled, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Me too, Sophia," I said. "Me too." As the years went by, I found myself reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of Olivia's betrayal had been a turning point in my life, a catalyst for change that had forced me to confront the parts of myself I had long ignored. I had spent so much of my life trying to be the perfect husband, the perfect father, the perfect provider, that I had lost sight of who I was. But in the aftermath of the divorce, I had rediscovered myself, not as someone's husband or father, but as Daniel Carter, a man with his own dreams, his own desires, and his own worth. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. Life was unpredictable, full of twists and turns, but I had learned to embrace the uncertainty. I had learned to let go of the need for control and to find joy in the present moment. As I sit here now, watching the waves roll in, I feel a sense of contentment that I never thought possible. The past is behind me, and the future is wide open. I am Daniel Carter, father, friend, and survivor. And for the first time in a long time, I am truly happy.